Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Annie and Kate. Welcome, Annie, and I will throw to Annie to welcome our guest tonight.
Yes, thank you, Kate. Our guest today is the fabulous Pip Marlow. She is currently CEO of Salesforce for Australia and New Zealand, an all-round Wonder Woman of the tech world. Prior to Salesforce, Pip was CEO of the customer marketplace team at Suncorp, which basically meant that she was responsible for driving customer focus into all areas of Suncorp's business. Prior to that, Pip was at Microsoft for a whopping 21 years. In a number of different roles across Australia and in the US as well, and most notably was Managing Director of Microsoft Australia for 6 years. It's also a non-exec director at Rugby Australia. She sits on the Vice Chancellor's Advisory Board at UTS, that's University of Technology Sydney, for those of you who don't know the acronym. And she's also an exec ally for Pride Diversity. Pip and I met actually on stage at a Salesforce conference judging a startup competition, and that's how we bonded, and I'm really proud to say that since then we've become really good friends. So Pip, thank you for being on our podcast and welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for asking me. I love that you're doing this, and it's fascinating that we did meet on stage there with one of the sharks, if you remember, and we're talking a lot about diversity in the startups and where, could you see diversity in the teams bringing ideas to us or not, and what was the impact of the lack of that? And you and I have had that as a common thread, I think, in our friendship since then. So it's great.
Exactly. And now, most importantly, that said shark, when I think either you or I asked a question of, how are you encouraging diversity in your team to make sure that you're representing the audience you wish to serve? And that said shark tried to kind of downplay the question and said it was irrelevant. And I
said he didn't care.
Yep. I was like, I'm going to kill him. Sorry, that makes it really obvious.
You and I, you can see the both of us.
I know precisely who you're talking about. But first, before we do that, let's talk about what we're drinking.
I have a lovely Barossa Cabernet Sauvignon.
I'm in the office, but I found where the wine is. So I've got some white wine.
Which is
very nice French wine. It's really nice.
Improvement on the last time you were in the office. Couldn't find any alcohol and then had to go
and I found the glasses
of gin and tonic.
Well, you do know that I am a gin and tonic girl, and I love a great G&T. But I'm also trying to be a little self-care right now. On Monday to Thursday, I'm trying to do alcohol-free. So tonight's beverage is a peppermint tea and some water. I'm double dipping. So a little bit boring, but it won't hold me back.
Hey, we fully appreciate and embrace the art of self-care. So good on you for doing that. It's something that I'm trying to get into, more herbal teas. So in the mornings, I'm more of a lemon and ginger tea.
I'm still a coffee girl in the morning.
I need coffee.
I just need that coffee.
So let's do our set questions first. Annie, do you want to go first?
I have. So we're going to ask you one question each, Pip. So my question for you is, what's the one thing about your career so far that's just been so surprising that you didn't expect?
To be honest, actually, it's probably. I never really expected to achieve the things I did in so many ways. Stephen, I still remember a really famous conversation with an old manager who's now a mentor and friend of mine, when he was asking me if I ever thought, I'd want to be managing director at Microsoft. And I almost fell over my words. It's like, I don't know. So many other great people, and I just, but the truth was actually I really did want to be, but I didn't feel comfortable saying it, or I didn't believe in myself to declare it. And he gave me a good kick in the pants, so to speak. And he said, it's okay to have ambitions. It's okay, do that and to share them. And that was a changing point for me. But I never, by the way, I never envisaged myself in technology either, by the way. So I think for me, it was just, ultimately achieving those things that, and that shift in my mindset about what's possible. And I wish I'd had that earlier. I wish I'd felt okay or comfortable in myself to have a belief in my career, my aspirations earlier. And I try and instill that in my daughters.
So what was the thing that kind of got you into technology?
I fell into it for $500. It's a true story. I'd moved over from New Zealand, and I had 2 job offers, one in a bank and one in a technology company, and one offered me $500 more than the other. Only reason I took it, but a really valuable lesson, because I didn't work at that company for very long because the culture was not good.
Right.
And it really taught me early in my career, no amount of money is worth working in an organization that's not aligned to your values, that doesn't treat you with respect as a human, as a female, as a colleague. And so I paid a hefty price for that $500, and I won't make that mistake again. Sorry to hear my dog says Archie and Ollie. They really love to join in a good podcast. So make them come in here.
Why not? I love that. She's just gone on mute to kind of tell them to be quiet for a little second.
I'm home alone except the dogs. Normally what I do is try and subtly text somebody in the family, quiet the dogs down, but home alone, so
there you go.
Hey, this is actually a dog and family friendly podcast, so if family members wander in and dogs and cats wander in, we're fine with that.
That's good then, really, isn't it?
Yeah, they heard you, Kate. Hey, do you want apparently this is a dog friendly podcast. Ollie, where's Fred, Annie? Ollie?
Hang on, I'll literally just go get it. She's
Kate, you regretting saying it now, aren't you?
No, I think it's fabulous. I really want, because it's a part of our lives.
Fred.
Can you see Fred? Oh, right there, look.
Yeah, I know. Oh, you did have a look, didn't you?
Oh, she is. She's probably having a good look at the screen now.
Yeah? Right. Archie, don't pick on your little brother. It's like real children.
Furry children are kind of cool, though.
Yes, they are.
Well, I always like the fact that with mine, you could leave them out in the backyard and go away for the weekend and no one would call the cops on you or anything.
So true. So true.
I wanted to ask you, what is your favourite popular culture thing, Pip, and why?
It's really hard. I'm not sure I'm a pop culture sort of person. I mean, I guess there's been some that I love that have been pop culture moments that I think are, Time's Up, Me Too. They've been, great moments of social change. I can tell you one that I could never like. I just can't do the Gangnam Style thing. I just can't. You don't even look good doing that, really, unless you're him. I can't go there. But I don't know. I haven't really thought about pop culture other than some of those social changing moments, which have been pretty fantastic. Oh, and K-pop. I do like a bit of K-pop. Is it bad?
That's definitely more on the leading edge of your pop culture there, my friend.
Sorry.
And who could have predicted that the K-pop stans would be rabidly anti-Trump? God bless them.
God bless them.
I got just a fantastic. Loved that.
Have you started on the old TikTok yet, Pip?
My children are both on there. They have made me do a dance or two. I've got a friend who's also, her son did one with her. He just recorded her doing something. He's got over 1 million views on it. But I have not really got into it other than that. I'm a bit of a watcher more than anything else than a participator.
Yeah, me too. I find some of them really hilarious, and then the rest is kind of just noise.
Some of them I have to get my children to explain it to me. Like, they're like laughing their head off. I'm like, what's funny about it? They go, oh, you wouldn't get it. I went, well, clearly not. That's why I'm asking you why it's funny. And like, oh, it's too hard to explain to you. I'm like,
dear me. So, question for you, just to kind of start us off in a bit more of a random chat. How did you ever, when you started at Microsoft, did you think, yeah, I'm just going to stick around here for a couple of decades? Or did it just kind of creep up on you? Because here's a weird fact for everybody just listening. Microsoft actually has quite a strong tradition of people staying there for incredibly long amounts of time. Yeah, so whilst for many of us, staying in a role now for 20 years is unusual, at Microsoft, even now, that is not unusual at all. So how does it work for you?
It's an interesting question, actually, Annie, because I was doing a startup before that, and I was 2IC in a startup, was running a team. I really enjoyed startup land. It's fun, it's crazy. There's no policies or procedures. You build it all. I started on day one with 3 of us. It was really cool. But I went to Microsoft because I've been trying to get them to do this idea I had with the startup, but I couldn't talk them into it. And the guy I was trying to pitch it to, after my 10th failed pitch to Microsoft, he said, "I know what you are trying to do. You're never going to get that done because you don't understand us and how it works." He goes, "But the problem you're trying to solve, we're trying to solve." He said, "So why don't you come and work for us and come over and help us solve this problem?" And it was at pay cut. And it was an individual contributor, and I was, leading a decent sized team. And I called my dad and I said, "Oh, pay cut, but Microsoft," this is back in 95, yeah. And he said to me, "You've been a big fish in a teeny tiny pond, go be a teeny tiny fish in a giant pond, and go and do that." And so I started working at Microsoft, and I never thought I'd be there for that long. And I remember, my dad was so proud that I worked at Microsoft. He used to cut out articles from the paper in the town I was in New Zealand. And in those days, he'd send letters, and I'd get a letter from my dad, whose handwriting was so bad I could barely decipher it. But there'd be an article about Microsoft in there. And, he was super proud that his daughter worked there. It was really gorgeous. But no, I didn't. And I'm really glad I did. I think it was an incredible company. I joined in 1995, the year that Windows 95 was launched. And it was just a bit of a watershed moment for technology, being put into the hands of non-technical people. And changing how that was being consumerized. So it was a really cool time. And 21 years later, when I left this, I cried. The day I called my boss to quit, I cried. It was so sad because I felt like I was leaving a really good partner. And I remember saying to my boss, I said, "I know this is going to sound cliche. It's not you, it's me. I need to go. I need to, learn some other things and try something." But I felt like I was leaving just a fantastic partner after 21 years. It was one of the toughest decisions I ever had to make.
And I think I randomly saw you at your leaving do at Banksy, just over in Barangaroo. And I was just sat with another friend, and you were sat with your team, but the news hadn't come out yet that you were leaving. And I'm sat there going, this is really weird, because you came over, you waved, and you just said, "I can't stop." And I think you obviously couldn't say anything. So I was like, that's very strange. And then about a week later it came out. I went, "Oh, that's what happened."
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're spot on. Yeah, it was that. And I love that team. It was, it is an incredible company, an amazing team. And I really loved working there. And I learned a lot. And I had some tough times. It wasn't all milk and honey, roses, and all those things. It was tough. I went through some really challenging years. I called it the dark decade, in the noughties.
Would that be around the Steve Ballmer time?
So it was after from Steve. This is my daughter Lucy. Lucy, this is being recorded, so let's make sure we don't say anything really bad. Lucy's doing a podcast.
Is that a Monty uniform?
Oh,
Yes.
Kate, well done.
I'm a Monty girl. Hello.
Are you a Monty girl?
Yeah.
What colour? Do you remember what colour house you were in?
Yeah, I was in McEwen. Blue.
Oh. Xavier, red. It's the best.
I'm sitting here right now going, I have no idea what's going
It's
on.
like Harry Potter. It's like in Harry Potter. Yeah.
You got sorted into houses.
Yes.
It's the exact same as Harry Potter. We sit there and everything. We put a hat on our head, and it's
Totally.
It's the exact same.
Well, and you just missed meeting Annie's dog Fred, but we had Ollie up for a bit. But anyway, I'll come see you later. Love you. Have fun. Will do.
Bye.
And since you're home, you could shut the door, please, and thanks. Thanks, son. Welcome to the family, by the way.
There you go.
I
Love
said
it.
it was a family-friendly show, so yeah. So
You did. You said dogs and family friendly, and I've ticked both boxes now.
Yep. Well done, Pip. Well done. Hey, I'm really interested in how you found going from Microsoft to your next organisation. Was it a real culture shock?
Oh, massive. And it wasn't just culture shock, it was a capability shock.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll explain what I mean. I'd worked in tech, and you guys both know this, tech's velocity, high speed, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So everything works at a really rapid pace. And then obviously I went to Suncorp, which is another incredible company, very values driven, but financial services, so large insurer, small bank. But financial services isn't necessarily velocity, but it's volume. Like it's highly regulated. The breadth and the complexity is exceptionally different. And in financial services, especially insurance, which is all about measuring risk, it really thinks about risk very, very differently. Like in tech, you just think about taking risk, take risk. Often in financial service, you think about managing risk, and that's a different mindset. But the capability shock was different for me. So I had, in my 21 years at Microsoft, I did middle 8 years over in the US. But, the last 8 years were back in Australia, and you're working at a multinational. So you get this amazing benefit of headquarters doing all these things, and they create that, they give you a skeleton, and then I say you get to sort of like dress the skeleton and localize it and land in a market. So a couple of months into my time at Suncorp, I was just really frustrated about how I wasn't making the impact I felt I should be making or the progress. And then I realized I was waiting for head office. And I thought,
You are head office.
Nobody's coming, Pip Marlow. This is you. You have to operate differently. And it was like one of those watershed moments. Actually, what made me successful there wasn't necessarily what was going to make me successful here. I had to build some other capabilities, work some other parts of my brain maybe I hadn't worked for a while. And then I loved it, because the other fantastic thing you get working, in an ASX company is, you are just making, capital decisions. You are defining the product. You are, owning the customer experience and go-to-market. You build that, you own it. Your strategic thinking capability just gets stretched, and I loved it. But I also found it fascinating when tech companies would come to call me, because I was the customer on the other side. And I think at first they thought it was going to be really great calling on me, Pip, tech companies, great. But I think if you spoke to a few of them, they'd say that they're the worst meetings of their life. Calling on somebody who used to do that job and is on the other side of the table, I think I made their life a misery. Not on purpose. It's just, you've now got both sides of the perspective to bring in. You learn.
You knew too much.
Yeah. In fact, I remember reaching out to Steve Worrell, who's replaced me at Microsoft, and saying to him, boy, I wish I knew now. I wish the stuff I knew now, I wish I knew earlier in my Microsoft career, because having sat on the client side, you get a whole different other perspective. And whilst I thought I was a very customer-centric person, I wasn't enough. Do you know what I mean? We often work at tech companies and we're so proud of our technology. We love it. We love what, our CRM can do, or our collab software, and we're really proud of it. So we come into customers and we want to tell you how much we can do for you and help you, because we love it so much. And we believe it can have an impact on you, but actually it doesn't matter to them. They don't wake up today going, woohoo, I need CRM, or I need X and Y. They've got a problem to solve. And unless you've spent the time truly, truly understanding the customer, then you don't really know what your product can do for them. So we've got to put that pride and excitement of our product to the side, even if we believe it can be, to actually be just as excited about understanding that customer and the pain points and the problems they have and the things they're trying to do, because then you can figure out how you can really help them. But it was an interesting, even though I thought I was helping them, I could have done more. So it's interesting learning.
So Suncorp, one of the things that I love about Suncorp, and I'm not surprised to hear you say values driven, because one of the things I love about Suncorp is they sponsor netball.
They do, Suncorp Super Netball.
I blooming love the fact that netball's on telly here. I mean,
it's so amazing.
It's one of the best sports to watch. It's non-stop I love what they've done this season as well around the rolling subs, the super shot, all the other different things.
Yep.
But one of the best things that I love is the advert. Was that something that you had a part in? So if you haven't seen it, go and just search on YouTube for Teen Girls and Suncorp. It'll come up super quick.
We'll put it in the show notes too. So Annie, send me the link and I'll add it to the show notes.
What I love about it, so just really quickly, it's a young girl. She's on a netball court, but she can tell she's not feeling it. She's not feeling her confidence. She doesn't feel like she can shoot the ball into the netball ring. And then this group of this squad of girls appears behind her and basically G's her up. And it just shows you that you're not necessarily just netball itself, but when you get a group of girls together, a group of women together, we are so good at being there for each other and G'ing each other up and giving you that confidence to take that step and just go do the thing, whatever the thing is. So I'd just be really interested, Pip, where did that advert come from?
So Team Girls started back when I was there. It was fantastic, and the sponsorship for the netball, which was, I think, we'd done a lot of sponsorship historically around league and other areas, which has been great. We've branched out into netball. We stopped a lot of other sponsorships to fund that and create Team Girls, which is all about building confident, financially literate females, which is so important, and we have some work to do around financial literacy more broadly in this country. And the ads, since I've been gone for just over a year, but the ads and the videos that we've done around that were always created and developed by female-only teams. All the production, the direction, the creation was all done by females, and we were really proud to make that whole movement around that. So it's incredible. If you look over the few years, we've done a different one every year, and it was started by Mem Haysom, who I hired in to be our CMO over there, who's an incredible leader, an incredible CMO, and she's really taken that and flown with it. She's also done great work with Amy and the Amy Queens. I don't know if you've seen the ads with the Amy Queens, which won in my last year. We won an award for diversity in marketing with that at the Australian Workplace Equality Award. So it was really, really cool too. So yeah, I'm really proud of what we've done around what they've continued to do around both Team Girls and equality and diversity in the ads.
I love how you had the all-female crew and to develop it. I think that's a really important thing and a really good story.
Well, I agree. The authenticity of that just goes straight from the message of the advert itself is, be confident, we've got your back, we're here for you. It's also the person filming it, the person who produced it, the person scoring it in the back. It's like, I didn't know that. That's really powerful. Yeah,
and you know what, I think there's this myth, I call it, about, women pulling other women down. I found the opposite in my career. I found people like you, who are supportive and constantly lift each other up. And it really bothers me that this myth that, women don't like other women succeeding. I feel like that's it's like this, like sometimes people do things, men and women do things. I'm not saying people are perfect, but I think it's turned into something. And so when you can show more and more stories actually of, women supporting other women in their work, in their life, we've got to do things to bust myths that have regretfully taken some legs over time. So I personally have not experienced. I've experienced men and women doing things to me at different times, but I don't think that myth is the reality.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's it's like a lazy myth to spread around, because there's always this sort of thing of it's always easier to believe the negative stuff than it is the really good and righteous stuff. And actually, you're right. The majority of the experience that I've had of female role models, female leaders, female co-workers or colleagues, peers, I've had nothing but help and support and a shoulder to cry on when I needed it.
I think it gets weaponized, Annie. I think, as I say, we don't weaponize men necessarily not supporting men in the workplace. but we weaponize women not supporting women in the workplace. And I think that's a real challenge for us. So we make a behavior that's probably equally seen in both genders, but we shine a light on it for the female and we label it and then we weaponize it. And I think that's problematic.
I think though it does, you feel more hurt when a woman does it to you than when a man does it, because you kind of feel like women shouldn't do that to you, like, because enough people are bad to women. Shouldn't we be nice to each other? I think
I think that's a spot on point, Kate. I agree. The disappointment feels greater.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hey, it's a sisterhood. Yeah, like we've had so many things working against us for centuries. Can we not? So I think you're spot on. I think it does hurt more.
Yeah. But when I think about my career, there's been like 2 women who were really evil to me, and hundreds who've been fantastic. Countless women. So the ratios are heading the right way.
Pretty good. I mean, because at the end of the day, we're just humans, yeah. And if you did the same for men, you probably have a couple of men who've not been great either.
I've had more men than women be evil to me after the years in the workplace.
So one other quick thing I did want to, because we were on the sports theme, we were talking about netball. I mentioned in your intro that you
I just wondered if we were going there.
Yeah, it's got to be asked. How does a Kiwi end up as a non-exec director of Rugby Australia? Is that not like...
Kate, what are you doing laughing? That's not a joke.
Look, it's no surprise that a Kiwi is, because, they're all fanatical about rugby, especially the women. But how Rugby Australia?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm going to declare I have an Australian passport. I have lived in this country more than I have lived in New Zealand. But first of all, I think Kate's right. Like, I did grow up watching rugby, and you grow up in New Zealand, you're like 3 million people, and you put a team up that gets results like that so consistent, you can't help but be just drawn into the cult of rugby. But I always loved it. Older brothers, and first 15 at school. I went to a co-ed school. Rugby was part of the community and the culture. Rugby brings a nation together, be it rugby or netball. So I have a great love of sport, and my parents always made us play a team sport. So I played netball, I played volleyball, I played softball, and my daughter Lucy, who you met before, plays both touch and sevens. She's a little rugby gun, that one. She's insane. So I love rugby. I love the sport. And now barrack for the Wallabies, because we live here. This is our home. We really, I pay taxes here. I vote here. This is I wanted our family to really put those roots into being here. And I'm not the only Kiwi-born person I know who does that. So Tony Stewart, who used to run NRMA and now runs UNICEF in Australia, he is a really proud Wallaby supporter. And he's the one actually who made me think about, you live here, everything's here. And he's the one who really challenged me in some ways. I never really told him that, so I must get him to watch this. So move that. So then I also try and be involved in women in sport, as Annie. So I've been trying to work around, often there's an event, they do, the Trans-Tasman Business Circle does events, pre-the Bledisloe Women in Sport, so try and engage in that, raise awareness around that. And through that, I got to know a number of people in the rugby community. And went through I got asked if I'd ever be interested, so my name went into the nominations committee. And then back when Mike Hawker was chair, and so just over 3 years ago, I came on to the board. It's been tough.
Yeah, it's not been a time.
Really, really tough. But again, easy things. If it was just easy, then
completely. But that's and that sort of thread around the fact that you do care so deeply about the LGBTI community. I'm not going to go into the whole Israel Folau saga, but I did want to ask, how did that feel as a director, a non-exec director, and somebody who genuinely walks and talks the right thing around being supportive to the LGBTI community? how do you carry that with you when you know that there's something really quite divisive going on?
Yeah, I really deeply believe in equality. I believe in equal access. I believe in equal opportunity. I believe in equal pay. And I look forward to the day that the color of our skin, our gender, our sexual orientation, those aren't the things that, you know, we use to label and define us. You know, that we are so much more than that. But they're part of us, you know, and I think when they're used again, you know, back to being used against people or, you know, filtering out, you know, I've experienced what it's like not to have equal access or equal pay or equal opportunities. So I think being an ally, as you said earlier, means you have to be able to, allies have to be able to take action. They have to be able to listen. They have to be able to speak up for others who may not be present in that moment. And that's true allyship for me. It's not just about, you've seen it in the Black Lives Matters movement, you know, saying you're not racist isn't enough. You have to be anti-racism. And that's about doing something. So when situations like that occur or others occur, I'll stand up for that. And at the end of the day, I would also walk away from things. I would, if things had gone maybe differently and we decided not to do something, not to stand behind our values, then I would walk away from organisations like that. Because if your values are only something printed on a piece of paper and put in your annual report, but you don't live them or stand up for them, I don't want to be part of that. So I was really proud, you know, to be part of an organisation who said, we're not going to accept that.
It's a pretty big move, though, and you know, because
not everybody agrees, of course, as you know. Just go to Twitter and try being only directors on Twitter.
but you know, like the Enron values. When one of the things that I often teach the Enron values, and I just show them as values on the screen and say, which company are these from? And no one ever guesses because they're good values. But they were clearly meant nothing more than a thing you stick on the wall in that particular organisation. Nobody cared about the values.
Yeah. You know, when I was exploring this job, I was meeting with our founder and CEO, Mark Benioff, as part of the process. And I hadn't yet said, look, I'd said to them, look, I'm not sure, wasn't sure if this is the right company for me. It wasn't because the technology wasn't good and people, but I wasn't sure yet on the culture. And that $500 lesson I learned very earlier in my career, I'm trying to really make sure I held on to that. And so when I met with Mark, he was like, hey, you know, I hear you're not quite sure if you want to come across. He goes, what do you want to know? I said, well, I want to talk to you about your values. I want to understand what you would sacrifice for your values. What revenue will you walk away from because actually you're not, to take that revenue or do that thing is against your values. What have you sacrificed them? And he talked to me about a state in the US that was going to change their legislation, which would be anti-marriage equality for LGBTI community. And he heard from his employees based on it. And based on that, he went to the governor of the state and said, if you pass this legislation, we will not hold any events here, not invest in this state. And we spend this much in this state every year on this, so we will not do that anymore. And then he went to the employees in there and he said, if this legislation gets passed, we will pay to relocate you to another state and give you a job in another state you want to, because you deserve to live in a state where your rights are basically the same as mine. And I went, you know what? He's putting his money and the company's money behind the values. I've got 4 core values as a company. One's equality. We have a chief equality officer, Tony Profit, actually, who I first met because he used to work at Microsoft. Great guy. I mean, I'm like, talk about just an incredible human being. We've got an office for humane and ethical use of technology. So they invest in their values. Every employee gets 7 paid days VTO. And I've worked for companies that give VTO, volunteering days off, all the time. The difference isn't 7, which is fantastic. The difference is you're expected to take them. You are expected to. And if you don't, they come in, they go, hey, what's up? What can we do to help you connect to take those off? We report it, and we recognize volunteering rock stars who achieve there. And it's like really, really, it's not like you can do it if you want. It's like, no, we want to hire people who want to do that. So, no company is perfect, but when it comes to, values, this company really lives them, and I love that.
So to me, it's really interesting that you had that really early lesson and you took it to heart, and that's kind of driven your career of only going to companies where you can see the values enacted, which is, I think, a really worthwhile lesson to learn early.
Yeah, well, I say it cost me dearly early. I did not have a great experience. And it was really early in my career. Like I remember going, it was my first sort of office job, and I was like, oh, is this what it's like? How do you deal with that? Like I didn't know. And after a pretty, not great experience, I'd called home and I'd spoken to my dad, and I said, oh my God. And he just said, that is not okay. That workplace is, that's not all right. And I didn't know. I was very young. I didn't know how to handle it, or there's no HR department. There's nothing. And in the end, I handled it by leaving. I voted with my feet. And so I think it taught me. It did teach me a super valuable lesson. I also think the culture is interesting and values are interesting, because when I explore culture, you want to go to cultures where the values are real, but where it's a culture, not a cult, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to go to a place where you can only have to be like X to be successful, because you want to add to the culture and build on it, not just, have all rejection because you're not in the cult or are different to what's already there. So I think, cultures are great, cults are not great.
You've mentioned your dad a couple of times. Was he a big influence on your career?
Yeah, totally. Oh, just influence on me as a person. Yeah, totally. Amazing dad. My dad died about 22 years ago. He was an incredible man, and you get me all upset.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. Yeah, he was huge. He was my go-to. He was like, I was talking about, work or career and challenges. He was definitely my go-to, and I think of him. In fact, this is my current. I've got all these notifications on my phone, but so on my phone, it's a young picture of my dad.
Oh, that's lovely.
With his parents in front of him, all black and white photos. So change the images occasionally. But yeah, I grew up I'm one of 5 kids. We grew up in, really just working class family, not too much money. We spent our time, holidays were camping, because putting 5 kids up in hotel rooms, too expensive. And if we turned up at the camping ground, it was raining, then we would hopefully get a cabin for the night if we could, and then put up the tent the next day. And my parents taught me a lot about equality, because in our house, everybody did all the chores. Like I could be, getting firewood whilst one of the boys was doing the dishes. There weren't gender chores. You just all had stuff to do. Peeling potatoes, my God, peeling potatoes for a family of 7. For years I peeled potatoes. I will never peel another potato in my life. Ever. I refuse.
That's one of our questions. What is one of the things you will never do again in your life?
Peel a potato. Peel a potato. Not happening. But yeah, big influence, and just an incredible man.
And you're a very, very proud mother as well, right? So you have, we met Lucy earlier. You've got 2 daughters?
Yes, Lucy and Sophie. That's why we got boy dogs, just to make Richard feel a bit better about that.
A bit of gender balance.
All about quality here. So we've got Sophie, who's at UTS. She's at year 2 in uni. And Lucy is a Monty girl like Kate. How is that? Spotting that.
Hilarious.
Although not quite in the right house, clearly. And Lucy's in year 11. And Kate, you'll be pleased to know they've just been doing house plays. I don't know if they did house plays, but we've gone through years and years of house plays, which has always been amazing. But this year we're having to record them. And so it's being, recorded and then released, I think, in a couple of weeks. So it's they love it. The house spirit is fantastic. It's a great school.
Yeah, it's very strong. It's a fascinating thing. It's really interesting how Harry Potter kind of picked up on that stuff and popularized it for the rest of the world. But
yes,
that whole boarding school culture of Britain, though, that's equally so. You can go back to St. Trinian's and whole bunches of different shows and stories.
Yeah, but it always looked so glamorous. Like when I would watch those when I was a kid, those boarding schools, it always looked glamorous.
It was glamorous, and it was sort of this otherworldliness of, oh gosh, I wonder what it would be like if I got to do it. And I remember, so I've got on one part of my dad's side of the family, his brother was in the army, and he was being posted all around Europe and different parts of Germany and Cyprus and things and stuff. So because he was moving around a lot, the kids, so my cousins, went into boarding school. And I remember meeting the cousins and having a chat about it. And then I said to my dad afterwards, I'm really jealous. So my parents actually went and thought about putting me into boarding school so that I could have that similar experience. And it was just fascinating. So that would have been ridiculous, by the way, to send me to boarding school, not least because of the fact that my parents wouldn't have been able to afford it back then, because, similarly, I came from a very working class background too. Back to the, being a mum, having daughters, being a leader in the technology community. How do you reconcile some of the systemic issues that we know are still there, whilst at the same time bringing up daughters and knowing this sort of balance between we've got so much to fix, but at the same time there's still so much goodness there? How do you balance that as a mum?
Yeah, look, I think about a couple of things. I think in raising their children, the girls always laugh at me. You're such a feminist, and so they think it. But actually, in moments of vulnerability, they go, yeah, actually, we're quite proud of you, and we think it's great. But they like to take the mickey out of me first. Make sure I'm keeping humble. It's the way of humble. So, we should have asked Lucy actually when she was here, and I'm really proud of the girls because. They too hold things like equality dear and women's rights in all forms, and that's sometimes when you go to a school like Monty can be challenging. So they're at a Catholic school and but they're really interesting when they look at bioethics and stuff like that too. I think there's the school's system is more open and exploratory too these days, which I think is helpful. I'm not even sure I sent them to Catholic school. It's just I went to it and we just put our kids through the same things we do.
Yeah, and it's changed since my day. We used to have a nun that stood at the gate and checked your uniform and sent you home if you weren't in it.
Yeah, now it's a teacher, not a nun. There is a bit of that, I can tell you. It's like, where's the hem on those? And the girls roll up the top of the skirts.
Things haven't changed. Good to see.
Some things haven't changed, Kate.
I think all the girls will probably be feminists by the time they're 40 when they've been through what we all go through when you hit the workforce.
But I think that's true because I think in some ways yet they haven't. They're in a bubble where in some ways they haven't experienced some of those challenges. Yeah. Although recently, I was speaking to some mums of friends of mine. So their kids are at a different school. The school's quite into rowing, and there's the head of the river. Mm. And when things were happening with COVID, the boys' one's date or something came forward, and they cancelled the girls' ones.
Yeah,
and they were like,
because girls' rowing's nothing.
Because they're going, the boys' rowing's a long heritage. This is a really big thing. So it's I was like, wow, that's, so that was really impactful and became quite a big gender discussion in a way that maybe they hadn't had. But, I think for me, Annie, I speak to a lot of girls about, self-worth, self-respect, and the ability to drive change. I mean, we are all benefiting from the people who went before us, yes?
Absolutely.
And hopefully the people who come after us will benefit from the work that we do. And then they will, our children and the next generation, they have to take courage of making this planet a better planet, making our community a better community. The thing I believe I have now that I didn't have is I have the power to change systems. And I believe a lot of the challenges we're facing are systems that were, even unintentionally, designed by men for men.
Yeah.
Okay? And so you're still coming through a world that has hundreds of years. So I've got this theory that is not tested by research, but what was most important hundreds and hundreds of years ago was physical strength. People fought for the lands, and physical strength is one of the most important attributes to survive. And that was, I think, the early stage of the gender power balance of issues, is when physical strength was required to take wealth. And therefore, the people with wealth then perpetuated building the systems, the political systems, the policies, the economic systems. Even if you think about GDP, we measure paid work. We didn't even measure the work that mostly females did. But if you didn't,
because they just do it, and we don't have to pay them for it.
Correct.
Great.
So even our financial measures, which were built that air conditioning in buildings was set based on a man's body temperature. The original airbag was by an all-male men's team, and when it was used at the start, it had disproportionately impacted women and children because they used the crash test dummy based on an average male's body.
Yeah.
So product design wasn't inclusive. Political design was not inclusive. Even, I would say if men could have children, you get super while you're on parental leave.
And we'd have much better pain medication.
Totally, yes.
And if men had endometriosis, we'd have a cure by now.
Yes. Oh, my daughters signed the tampon tax petition too. So I was like, what? You mean this is unbelievable. So they're starting to get some of those moments. So, but what you get when you get to a position of mind is the ability to take control of some of those systems, to look at the promotions. Every time we look at promotions, we will slice and dice that by gender. We'll go, okay, we're looking at doing stock allocation. How is, are we doing the right, view by gender? Why are we disproportionate? If females are, 35% of the workforce and are only getting 10% of the stock or the bonus, let's just stop and have that discussion. And I love to say to people when those things happen, boy, we're doing a tough, bad job as managers. And they're like, why? And I go, well, does it mean we can only develop males? As managers, we're not good at developing female talent. We've got to have a good look at ourselves. It's like,
And I think that's the most important thing. I did a talk last night, and I was talking about diversity in the workplace and saying a lot of what we need to do as allies is when we're in the room, advocate for the people who aren't in the room.
Yeah. And,
just that thing of, when they're choosing someone to go and do an interesting project and they say stuff like, oh, we can't choose Mary because she's got kids. And like if Mary's the best candidate, let's let her work out what to do with the kids. After all, they probably do have a father.
Indeed.
Those are generally required. I mean, not all the time, but statistically.
Yeah. Let's put it to her. She wants to take the opportunity. And the number of benign men who don't wake up every morning and think, I want to discriminate against women, but who try to support women in dysfunctional ways are really, really something that I've, been fighting against for all my career.
The part that I really loved, Pip, that you just spoke about was, looking at the statistics and looking at that information, that insight, and then turning it back on the managers to say, this is your problem to fix. It's not just, gosh, how did that happen? Gosh, I'm sure it was somebody else's fault. And looking around the room and waiting for someone to take the blame. It's like, we must be.
No, it's us.
Yes.
It's us. It's the management community. We choose who gets promoted. We choose who gets a pay rise. We choose who gets a stock allocation. We choose who gets hired. It's on us. So no, I'm a big believer. And the data, and using data, it is great. I do believe in using data. It can really shine a light into, corners. Everybody has the right to their own opinion, but not their own facts. Okay, so you can have your own opinion on things, not a problem, but these are the facts. Now let's talk about the facts. We have our opinions about why we think they are that way. Okay, but that doesn't change that. So I think that's really important to be able to do that and make this. But that's why I say, there are things in as individuals, and as you come up, like through the ranks, and you get more opportunity to change the systems. Because when you can change the systems, you can drive impact at scale.
And you can change people's lives.
Yeah.
Yep. And this seems like an excellent spot to draw this to a close. So thank you very much, Pip. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Annie. And thank you, everybody who's watching. Please like us and leave a good review. And don't forget to subscribe. We'll be back shortly. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.